Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mercury. I'm here today with Planet Destiny, bringing you a guide on how to play Rift in Iron Banner. Let's get right into it. The very first thing I want to say is something that I advocate in every PvP mode, but it's join the game chat. It's even more important during Iron Banner, and being able to talk to just one or two teammates can make a huge difference in how the game feels. And coordination and organization is significantly easier when you're communicating. That's a general tip. And let's move into some specific tips specific to Rift. The very first thing is push towards the center and try to hold it. Defend the lanes, cover the spark. In Rift, the team that controls the center almost infallibly wins. To visualize this, let's imagine for a second that the spark is positioned where the B point of the map would be if you were playing control, and each team's rift is on either A or C. Now in control, you like to have part of the team on your home point to defend it and prevent a spawn flip, or pushing towards the other team's home point to cause a spawn flip, and the rest of the team goes to B. In Rift, however, everyone should be going to the B point, and then when you either get the spark or don't, everyone should push forward or fall back, depending on whether you are now on attack or defense. So from this point in the early game, things are going to go one of two ways. Either your team is going to get center control, or your team is not going to get center control. Let's talk about what happens if your team does get center control. That means you've successfully managed to overwhelm the enemy team's initial push, and you now have complete center control. The spark will spawn, and either you or a teammate will be able to pick it up. If you don't get the spark, but a teammate does, what you have to do is simple. Defend the runner by pushing with them or in front of them. It doesn't matter which direction they go. Your job is to protect the spark runner as best you can. You can use your super to clear a path if you've got it up, or you can just run with a group of your allies and try to keep the runner alive. You need to think of them like the MVP, and they have to be escorted and survive. If you let them go off on their own, their chances of survival go down drastically. However, if you don't manage to score, meaning the spark runner is killed or the timer runs out, and you're still alive, you need to immediately fall back to the center and try to set up control again. If you stay overextended, you'll end up getting flanked, and the other team will gain mid control, which is an easy way for you to lose. Now, that's not the exciting part of Rift. What's the exciting part of Rift is when you're the one who takes the spark. If you want to be taking the spark, you really should probably try to be one of the more mobile subclasses. That means either a blinking warlock or hunter, a hunter with bones of Yao and better control, a shade stepping night stalker, or even a titan who can skate, preferably with Twilight Garrison. All those subclasses offer quick, unpredictable movement and makes it much easier to run the spark. There are 4 types of pushes you can do when you do get the spark for yourself. The first is the aggressive push. It relies basically on the other team not getting back to defend their rift soon enough. As soon as you take the spark, you and your teammates just book it, push as fast as you can towards the opposing team's rift. This is most often used by inexperienced players, and it also works the best against inexperienced players. Against a good team, it's probably not going to happen, and you're going to leave your team overextended with basically no chance of getting center control. The route I like to run most of the time is called a conservative push. It basically offers the best chance of succeeding when done correctly. And simply put, the runner's teammates form a wall of sorts, pushing in front of the runner, and they use the advantage of numbers to basically push any defenders who are in the way to the side. A well-organized communicating 5-man wall is one of the hardest things to defend in Rift, and it can really only be countered by well-used supers or by defenders throwing everything into the lane that the push is coming from. In order to do this, the runner basically just hesitates after getting the spark and lets the teammates push and then follows behind them. If you're playing with randoms, unfortunately, the best you can hope for is probably going to be 2 or 3 people pushing ahead of you, but that's better than nothing. If you can't get at least that many, then one of the other techniques I'm going to talk about may be better suited. But a trick I've found that is very useful in playing with randoms is to follow behind the 2 or 3-man push and stay out of sight until the last possible minute. And what this does is it makes defenders second guess where exactly the runner is, and they're less likely to all-out collapse on the push as quickly as they would if they knew the runner was there. You can also use something called flanking. It's a tricky maneuver in which the spark runner takes an indirect path of the opposing team's rift, usually along the outside of the map. It relies on the enemy team being distracted by the runner's teammates pushing from a different direction, and it works really, really well when conservative pushes have been used before it, because as the enemy team reacts to the perceived push, they'll collapse on that lane, and it leaves the alternative lanes unguarded. You definitely have to be careful when using these, however, as a flanking runner is generally alone or with only a single teammate, and it means if the initial push isn't enough of a distraction, they're very easily killed. These can be set up with or without communication, simply by observing the direction in which the majority of the team goes after picking up the spark, and then just going in a different way. But in order for it to succeed, the enemy team cannot realize it's being flanked, or they need to be overpowered by the initial push so that they can't react to it. Once a flank has been used, it actually strengthens the power of the conservative push, as the opposing team will be hesitant to pull defenders off outer lanes to cover it. And then feinting is probably my personal favorite. It starts off as a conservative push and ends as a flank. Basically, you follow the push just long enough for it to begin engaging with the defenders, and you allow the defenders to see you. This will collapse onto the main push, and then as a runner, you drop back into an alternate route. It has to be done quickly and decisively, or else the defenders will get suspicious they haven't seen the runner again, and they'll pull defenders back, and they'll end up catching the runner basically out in the open. I find this works really well with random teammates, as it doesn't require a strong coordinated push, and instead takes advantage of the aggressiveness and impatience of the defenders. However, once it's been used once, it probably isn't going to be that easy to do it a second time. There are a couple more tips and tricks I want to give to you guys as runners. Basically, probably everyone knows this, but if you can, try to dunk the spark backwards. You get a bonus of 150 points. If you're under fire and you can't do that, try sliding, shade stepping, or titan skating into the rift. If you have your super up, don't pick up the spark. Let someone else pick up the spark and use your super to clear the way. If you're sitting on top of the spark waiting for it, if you hold down the pickup button, as the countdown finishes, it will actually grab it slightly faster when it does appear. And if you're ever in the center and you're unsure whether your team will be able to hold it or make a successful push, basically pick up the spark. The worst case scenario is you'll lose a couple hundred points for your team, but if you don't pick it up and the enemy team does, you could lose a couple thousand. Even if you die immediately after getting it, the alternative is much worse than you just dying with the spark. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean just run up to it and grab it every time you feel like it, even if your team has solid control and there's an enemy sniper staring at the spark. That's not what I'm talking about. It just means that it's better to pick it up and die than to let the other team get the spark, because the team that has more pickups combined with center control almost always wins. Now let's say your team doesn't get center control. Defending is basically a much simpler business than attacking. If you don't get the spark and the enemy does, just immediately fall back to your rift. Pay attention to the areas your teammates are covering and either provide assistance if all lanes are being watched or cover a different lane if they're not. Noticing where your teammates are and what is left open is immensely helpful in preventing an opposing runner from just waltzing in to score. 6 people all staring down one lane doesn't do anything unless the runner is actually there. So as a defender, you should basically be making the attackers come through the choke points, which gives you the advantage even if you're outnumbered. Grenades into choke points, using supers, and team shotting can make it so that 2 or 3 people can hold off 4 or 5, which leaves the other defenders free to prevent a flank. When you see your teammates start to engage, be wary of the flank coming, but provide as much support as you can, especially if you see the runners start an aggressive push. One of the biggest issues I see with players new to Rift is they overextend on defense and then fall prey to aggressive pushes. Think of you and your teammates like a net. The farther away you are from each other, the more spread out you are and the bigger the gaps in the net, and the runner can go through these gaps. If you fall back and tighten up, it makes it much less likely that the runner will have a gap to break through and get into the rift. That's why I say if you don't get the spark, fall back immediately. The worst thing you can do is have the spark runner go straight past you and then have to chase him down. A couple last things to remember for defenders. The runner has a time limit. As a defender, if you can hold them off long enough, the game will reveal them for your team to see, and then it will actually detonate the spark if the time runs out. And don't hesitate to use your super to shut down a push or a runner. A single kill on a spark runner is basically worth a triple on normal players. That's it for this episode, guys. I really hope this helped you learn a little bit more about Rift. Hopefully it'll help your gameplay, and remember to like, favorite, and subscribe for more. Thanks. Bye.